This thing is having a really hard time focusing. So, you're welcome for that view.
The moon shines red, rainy skies ahead, and her heart beats fled. Woke up in her bed to the moonlight.
Hey guys, howdy. If you are new, I am Tatum. Almost forgot my name there for a second. And I make videos on eating disorders, as I'm sure you know from the title of this video, and I make singing videos, and I used to make vlogs. I am coming to you guys today to give you my advice as to how to tell somebody that you have an eating disorder, whether this is your parents, siblings, friends, whoever. I wanted to share my advice. And this isn't necessarily like a, this is how you have to do it kind of video, but more so just a suggestion. And like I've said before, I just go based off of my own experience. So I'm not a professional, and I just come up with things and then turn on the camera and tell you them, and they might not all apply to you. And I don't always get everything right, but that's okay because I'm a human, and we don't expect perfection on this channel. So let's get into it. So I'm gonna start this video off by sharing my own personal experience, and I don't really have this big dramatic story about how people found out, but I still wish that I had done things a little bit differently. The only people that I actually told were my grandma and my dad, I believe. My friends and family members, besides my grandma and my dad, I think kind of just figured it out on their own, although I don't know how much they knew, and that made things kind of difficult because there was just this secret that was kind of a secret but kind of wasn't, and I didn't really know who knew, how much they knew. My dad, it took him and my grandma a while to wrap their heads around the fact that it was an actual eating disorder, because I told them everything that I was kind of dealing with, and then they both said, well, but you don't actually have an eating disorder. And I, at the time, didn't really have the tools to be able to tell them properly, so it took until I went to treatment for them to really actually be able to wrap their head around it and understand it a little bit more. And I think that if I, had those tools and knew what was a good way to go about approaching the subject, that maybe it would have been easier for them to understand it a little bit. So first off, just let me say that this is really, really important to do sooner rather than later, because I know for me, as time went on, I became a lot less inclined to actually open up to people about what I was going through, because I became more and more protective over my eating disorder. The more that it stuck around, the more I felt like it was a part of me, and I did not want to let that go because it was serving this big purpose in my life, even though it was an unhealthy purpose. And in the beginning, I think because it was fresh and new and I hadn't become so used to it, and it wasn't a ginormous aspect of my life, it would have been a lot easier to actually tell people and be more open and ask for help and accept the help. In my own experience, I've realized that when I put things off because I'm afraid, I spend all of that time in fear, and I could have just confronted it earlier, and then there would have been fear and it would have been difficult to deal with, but then the fear would be gone, or at least very significantly decreased after that. But instead I just spent a very, very long time in fear, anticipating this moment happening. Talking to people about it, it's not easy, and I know that that's not what you probably want to hear, but dealing with an eating disorder for years and years and years isn't easy too. The next thing I'm gonna suggest is to pick somebody that you trust. That rhymed. Make sure that you're picking somebody that you feel comfortable with, who you feel like you can open up to and makes you feel safe, and like isn't gonna go blabbing about it to everybody, and that is gonna be able to comfort you and support you. And I know that not everybody has somebody like this in their life, and that's gonna make things more difficult, which sucks. But that does not mean that recovery isn't possible. It doesn't mean that you can't find people to open up to and be vulnerable with. And it might even help to not just think about your family members and your friends. You could think about talking to a coworker or a teacher, anybody in your life that you know isn't going to make this a negative experience for you. And that kind of moves us into my next tip. And that tip is to tell a stranger. I started telling random people that I knew wouldn't care or be affected in any way and that I would probably never see again long before I told friends or family members. And that was really, really helpful because it gave me the opportunity to verbally say out loud that I had an eating disorder. And this can be really, really hard to do for the first time. So it might help to do it for the first time with somebody like that, so it isn't as terrifying as an experience for you. So then when you do actually go to tell your friends and your family members, you've already done it. And I know that that's a completely different experience, talking to them. But it's definitely going to make it easier, not easy, but easier to say those words to your family and your friends in the future or whenever you choose to do it. So now I'm going to address the conversation aspect of telling somebody that you have an eating disorder a little bit more instead of just the stuff leading up to it, like I've said up until this point. And this tip or suggestion or whatever you want to call it, I'm going to call state your expectations. So before you start having this difficult conversation with somebody, I think that it might be important to think about what you are hoping to get out of it. So do you want them to just sit and listen? Do you want them to give you feedback? Do you want not advice, but feedback? Do you want them to ask you questions, etc.? And you might not even know what you want to get out of it, and that's perfectly fine. You might just not want this big thing on your shoulders weighing you down anymore. There was no pun intended. Whatever it is, I think that it's really important to state some of these things to them before you actually get into the conversation. And it'll also be helpful to tell them what will not be helpful for you and make it clear whether you're asking for their help or not. So you could start off by saying, hey, I have something that I've kind of been wanting to talk to you about. Is now a good time to talk? And usually when somebody hears something like that, they'll make time because from the sound of it, they can tell that it's important, but that's not always the case, so don't expect it to be. And I know that that can be kind of challenging because sometimes we only have motivation to talk about certain things in that moment, and if the person that we're going to open up to is not ready to hear them in that moment, or they're busy or whatever, it can be hard to find that motivation again. So hopefully, here's hoping that whoever you do choose to tell will make time to listen and will sit there with you when you want to talk to them about it. So then when they've sat down with you to talk, you could then say something like, before I say anything, I just want to say that I just want you to listen, and I would love it if you could be understanding and not get mad at me or make me feel like you're ashamed of me, because that's just going to make me shut down and not want to share. And again, I want to stress that it's really important to share this information with somebody that you know is going to treat the situation in a careful manner and be kind to you about it, because a bad first experience can really set the tone and make it a lot harder to talk to people about it in the future. And also, another thing is that you want to make sure that you are driving the point across that this is a serious issue and that it's not just a phase, and that you're not just having issues with food, but that you have a legitimate eating disorder. Because that's a mistake that I made in the beginning, and actually not just in the beginning, but through a large portion of my eating disorder did I say that right? Is that I just said that I had issues with food, and I didn't actually say that it was an eating disorder. So people weren't really aware of that. They didn't understand that it was an actual mental illness and something that I couldn't really help, and that was more complex than they knew of. So make those statements and then start opening up about it. Tell them whatever you feel comfortable telling them in that moment, and also know that this is most likely not going to be a one-time conversation. It's probably not going to be a one and done type thing. If you're talking to people that you care about and that truly care about you, they're not just going to set it aside if they really understand that it is a real issue. They're going to want to make sure that you're okay, which means addressing the subject more than once. Next, after you've opened up to them about everything, I would say that it is important to educate them. If you're feeling open to it and they're being receptive, then just start telling them more about what eating disorders actually are and more about your specific eating disorder and what that is, what that means for you, so they can really understand the complexity of it as best as they can. And this is a hard thing to hear and to accept, I think, as well, but nobody is going to be able to understand it as much as you are unless they've had an eating disorder. When you're talking to your family or your friends or whoever it is about this, make sure that you specifically say that it is not just about food, that food is the coping mechanism and that you have deeper issues that need to be dealt with. And tell them to do their research on it or sit there and do research with them and help them find the information that applies to your situation the best. And you can even show them this channel if you wanted to, if you felt like that would help. And you can find other videos, sites, whatever you want that you feel like is going to help them understand it. My last bit of advice, which I actually got into a little bit already, is to take advantage of your motivation. I don't know if it's just me, but I tend to have days where I feel a lot more motivated to recover than other days. Or at least I felt that in the past. I think it's not as black and white as that anymore. And I've talked about this thing that I'm gonna say on my channel before as well, but I also have a tendency to sabotage myself a lot, which this is related, I promise. One thing that I found that's really helpful is to turn some of these negative traits that I have into positive traits. So on days when I'm feeling more motivated, I like to sabotage my eating disorder instead of myself. So I'm still doing the same thing, but it's directed towards my eating disorder, and then it becomes a healthy choice. By this I mean I'll go up to somebody and I'll tell them all of the lies and ways that I've gotten around eating, and that will be really good for me in that moment. It'll feel really good to get that off of my chest, and then later on I'll feel full of regret and wishing that I never said a damn thing, but in the end it's really good for me because I can't get away with those things anymore. So take advantage of your motivation that you have, even if you just have it for a few seconds, to go up and tell somebody that you have an eating disorder. Just do it. Don't think about it too much because you might convince yourself out of the idea. If you feel motivated, just right then go and do it. And then you might feel upset, but at least you did it, and at least you can be proud of yourself for taking a healthy step. Anyways, that is all that I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching my video. If you liked it, then please hit the like button down below and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more content like this. And I will see you guys soon in another video. I am going to be uploading on Fridays now, I think. I've been uploading on either Monday or Tuesday. I don't know. It kind of goes all over the place. I'm trying to make it Fridays. We'll see what happens. I love you all very much, and I hope you have a great night. Bye.